come back because we've got two amazing speakers this evening. We've got Brian Phelan, who's going to present a history of the English gardens, and that's terrific. Lots of information. And Iain Crowell will talk about the native flora and fauna of the island and the varied habitats where they are found. And following that, there'll be a question and answer session. So
okay, so now the fun part. The part that everybody came to hear and see. We are really lucky to have two presentations tonight, and they're connected. So they're connected because we're talking plants and we're talking natural history. And some of the plants are wild ones and some are introduced ones. So, and some are ones we don't want, but they came anyway. So Brian and Iain are going to do a talk. Brian will talk mainly about the English gardens, and I am going to introduce both speakers now so then I can sit down. And Iain drew the coin for going first. So Iain is going to talk about the native flora and maybe the fauna too, a little bit, but mostly plants and the varied habitats where they can be found. So just a little bit about Iain. Iain Crowell worked for us a couple of summers ago during the pandemic, and we were so impressed with his knowledge and love of plants. And for me, I'm a plant lover too, and I thought, wow, this a young person who's just crazy about plants and knows so much. We thought it was pretty impressive. So Iain worked a lot with Brian Phelan, who also is a plant lover, and they came up with some ideas for the English gardens and how to promote them better. So one of the projects that Iain worked on for us was to develop this QR code system. So anyone who's in the Victorian or English gardens can notice the little QR codes, and you can just go right up to them and with your phone, and then learn all about the Japanese maple or the copper beech or any number of trees that are in the English gardens on the Hugon and Perrin estate. So Iain has a degree from Mount Allison in biology or environmental studies, but his love of plants is really what I think propels him. And for anybody who follows, who is on iNaturalist, how many posts do you have on there? It's like a couple thousand. So he's quite frequently on the iNaturalist app and doing identifications and sightings. So I'd like to introduce Iain and thank him for working for us for the summer and thank him for continuing to be a volunteer. I'm also going to introduce Brian now so I can sit down. And I can't really introduce Brian without introducing Kathy because they're a tag team. So Kathy and I were actually in the same class at the agriculture college back in, I'm not going to tell you when. A long time ago. So we were classmates and we only kind of connected when, yeah, you were at the AC. I thought you looked familiar, but it's like a long time ago. So I don't know where, did both of you meet at the AC or did you know each other before that or after? Before, okay. So Brian was also at, we call it the agricultural campus of Dalhousie University, which happens to be in Truro. Back then it was called the Agriculture College or the AC by those of us who graduated from the place. So Brian Phelan went to the Agriculture College and then later on got a job with the city and worked his way all the way up to be the superintendent in the public gardens and other parks and special places within HRM that we all love. So Brian is an arborist and still maintains his arborist certification to climb trees. Although I think you did climb a couple in the gardens, didn't you, Brian? So he knows a lot about the trees, and He came to McNabs Island, not through a summer job, but it was through a connection that I had with Landscape Nova Scotia, because I knew some people there. And I was trying to get some volunteers who were skilled arborists or horticulturalists who could come over and take a look at the gardens that were there and had not been touched in like 50 years to see what could be done to try and restore the trees and patch them up. So I made some connections through Landscape Nova Scotia. Next thing you know, we had a volunteer day, arborist day, and Brian was one of the key people involved. I can't remember the numbers that we had. I wasn't even around. I think I was in Europe at that time. But I think Faye was there organizing it. Yeah, arborist. And that would have been probably 10 years ago or more. Brian, I guess, I'm guessing, when he got to McNabs and saw the beautiful garden and then decided, well, you know, when he retired, he was going to start helping us. So we've been very fortunate to have someone lead the charge to restore the English gardens on McNabs, with Brian organizing some of the work party events that we do and connecting with his arborist friends who come occasionally and climb the trees and do the pruning. So it's been a great help for the cause. So I'm going to ask Iain if you want to come up and get yourself started here. Is that how it was working with this laptop? Correct? Okay, you know what to do. Okay, all right.
Hello. I should have got this. Yeah, so like Kathy said, my name's Iain Crowell. I was a summer student on McNabs Island back in 2020. I was kind of just a bumbling post-university grad who liked plants. And since then, I've used Kathy for some references, and she's kind of been a crucial help for me to kind of get a job as a botanist who gets paid money to look at plants. So thanks a lot to Kathy for all the help she's been over the years. So I'm going to talk about the biodiversity of McNabs Island. I'm mostly going to talk about the native flora, some interesting medicinal edible foods, some interesting kind of little tidbits, and some of the habitats where we find those plants. I just wanted to start off with a couple of pictures to catch your eye. These are all photos I took back when I was a student on McNabs Island. There's the beautiful blue flag iris that's kind of quite common along the coastal trails. A nice little swamp plant called swamp candle, and then a very diminutive salt marsh rock, classic grass type species of a salt marsh, and it's really common all throughout McNabs. So McNabs Island has a lot of biodiversity. There's a lot of plants. There's lots of everything. So one of my summer tasks back in 2020 was to catalog and kind of collect information on species list for different types of taxa. And so through that work, I came across probably 200 or more plant species, and there's probably quite a bit more, but that's how many we have right now. It seems to be 163 bird species that have been seen on the island, which is quite a lot for the Halifax area. There's about 60 or more insect species, about 20 mammal species, and then getting into kind of into the weeds, we have 40 species of marine algae and 42 other marine species like fish or mollusks or things like that. And so the question is, who collected this data? I certainly didn't collect all of it myself. A lot of it was done back in 1966. So on the first two there, you can see it was the Nova Scotia Museum. They were helped by the Nova Scotia Bird Society, the Dalhousie Biology Club, I'm not sure if that's still in existence, and the Nova Scotia Research Foundation. So they did work on algae, marine species, fish. They found some amphibians, a couple of reptiles on the island. There was an additional Nova Scotia Department of Environment survey on plants. I can't quite remember the year for that, but they did a quite comprehensive inventory on plants. So that's kind of what I based my research on back in 2020. The data for birds is through a citizen science website called eBird. It's very active by all kinds of birders today. And then the data on insects was from mainly from Brianna Fitzgerald, who was a summer student back last year. She made the nice, super nice bug board and collected a lot of good information on that. And she's gonna hopefully do more this summer, I think. And then I collected some additional information on plants and a few other things. And then in addition to that, Kathy mentioned iNaturalist. I'm a huge fan of the platform. People have submitted lots of observations over the years on that platform from all of those groups. And so that's really helping us further understand the biodiversity on the island. So here's a map of the island that I'll kind of be referencing as we go. It shows a variety of habitats. So McNabs Island, being a coastal island, it has all kinds of habitats on it. Some interesting, some a little less interesting. The dominant thing you'll find on the island is old-field white spruce. It's mostly a sign of previous cultivation, and it's been impacted in the past by hurricanes. So last year it was impacted by Hurricane Fiona. Back in the early 2000s, Hurricane Juan came through, and it really blew over a lot of these old-field white spruce. So it's really makes it tough for the forest to regrow, but that is quite common on the island. There's on the north side of the island. It wasn't suitable for development back when settlement happened through military or through whatever other reason. So it has remained quite pristine. So it's quite nice to go back there and find some different stuff you wouldn't find in the forest by the piers. There's a couple rare freshwater seepages with some freshwater plants. This would be what the deers would drink from. There are deers on the island, so this is what they would access instead of drinking the salt water. There are meadows, a good sign of human activity, and there are a few small Acadian forest remnants. Most of it has been cut over, but there is a little bit left that got spared from development through military and housing and community. There's that again. So I just mentioned the Acadian forest. This is a photo that was taken a few years ago on the island. So there are some large trees still around. This one's a yellow birch, a really classic species of old Acadian forest. And it was one of the few left on the island. This was in the Wreck Cove area. And there's also some Acadian forest kind of along the south end, which is where we don't often go with tours, but there is some nice forest down there. And 300 years ago, before there was any development, this would have been the dominant forest type on the island, and this would have covered the vast majority of the island. This is an example of kind of a brackish pond, Finley's Cove Pond, just to the north of Garrison's Pier, I guess it would be. It has varying levels of salinity, so you can find different things of biodiversity like sea urchins, spike rushes, or savanna sparrows, all kinds, or something like this whimbrel right here, which is just adjacent at McNabs Pond, and it's a great area. I mentioned meadows. You'll most often find these along trail edges, exposed sunny fields, and the dominant species you'll find in here is a plant called hay-scented fern. It doesn't really smell like hay. I don't think. It's kind of almost like a peppery plant smell. And it's rhizomatous, which means that it has stems that run underground, and it'll spread not as clumps, but just as a big mat of ferns. So especially if you're walking along the north end, you'll see these trails, and all along the side, you'll see hay-scented fern the whole way along. And it'll often make a fragrance, especially if you ever walk through it. It'll really kind of stink up the air. And they're excellent indicators of past settlement as well. Now to get into a couple of the different foraging foods you can find on the island, which has been quite a popular topic, and it's a good way to get interested in kind of the plants around you. There's all kinds of stuff, but it's always good to make sure you're practicing safe and sustainable, especially on an island like McNabs. You want to be careful about over harvesting. The most obvious foraging is berries. McNabs has all kinds. There's strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, service berries, cranberries, wintergreen, also known as tea berry. And then you have lingonberry, raspberry, chokeberry, and huckleberry. Basically every berry that I would consider kind of tasting edible in Nova Scotia, besides maybe cloudberry or bake apple is what it's known. That isn't on McNabs, but all these other ones are, and you can find them along most of the trails. Because of the coastal nature, it's a great spot to do some coastal foraging. The classic one would be dulse, a type of kelp or seaweed that's quite tasty. Another one, sea glasswort, might be not quite as well known, but you can cook it up, and I know people have it in butter. You can also just eat it raw. It just has a very salty taste, but I think some people call it sea asparagus, just mostly based on the look, I think. But it's really common along Majors Beach and along any other kind of sandy beach. You'll find it in the wet sand growing or in the salt marshes. It can be green or it can be kind of reddish as well, and it's edible both ways. Next one is Irish moss, common along McNabs Island. It's fairly common along the Atlantic coast. Some places you don't find it quite as much, but you can certainly find it along the beaches here. And the last coastal treat isn't really edible. It's northern bayberry. I have the berries here, but they are, you can use them as a cooking substitute for bay leaves. They're not related to the bay plant, but it has kind of that same fragrance. And then you can use the berries, which have a similar fragrance. And I know people use the wax from the berries to make candles, to make soaps, to make any kind of wax things they're going to do. I think the way they do it is they boil the berries in the water, they take a strainer, and then they'll strain out the berries, and then the wax will remain. And then they use the wax for wax making. In terms of plants maybe you don't want to eat, there's a couple poisonous plants in the island, which I'll point out. I found this one back in 2020. It's called spotted water hemlock. It's a member of the carrot family, and it looks a lot like other members of the carrot family. But it's actually the most poisonous plant in North America, if you could believe that. We usually think of kind of plants here, they're never kind of at the extremes for any kind of reason. But this is one that kind of fits that bill. It's really dangerous. It's deadly to humans if you eat just a little piece, and even just kind of little small pieces of the root. I think have been fatal to cows. It's called spotted cowbane as well, is another name for it. But it's not dangerous to the touch. So I've picked it up and pulled it and done whatever, and it's not going to get through your skin or anything. It does have lookalikes, so it looks a lot like Queen Anne's lace, the flower. I'll put that in the next slide. And the leaves, you may think of those as looking kind of like angelica leaves. You might get them confused. So this is the flowers. The flowers look like a typical carrot family member. And like I said, Queen Anne's lace, very similar, but you'll notice that the leaves are different. And it grows in full sun, generally in wet areas or along the edge of wet areas. There was a decent sized patch right at the end of Garrison Pier back in 2020. I think it was pulled by DNRR. I found another one at the north end of the island as well, and it's fairly widespread in the HRM. I found some at Crystal Crescent Beach, right along the edge of the beach. It's fairly common, but hopefully people don't go foraging for it. I'm just going to do 2 slides of just some interesting plants on the island. The first one is pink lady slipper, which was one that we probably all know. I'm from PEI. This is the provincial flower of PEI, so I really like it. And the next one is Joe Pieweed. This photo was taken along Garrison Road. It's a good habitat, or it's a good food source for monarch butterflies. So it's a really good one to plant in your home garden if you're looking at kind of partially wet, full sun plants. And here are kind of some funky plants that aren't quite as straightforward as pink lady slipper. The first one is dog vomit slime mold. And I don't know if anybody knows what a slime mold is, but it's kind of a weird thing. It's not a fungus, it's not a mushroom, it's not a lichen. It's a protozoan, so it's actually a very primitive life form. It's just a collection of cells. And you'll find these little things which look like kind of vomit. They'll show up for a week and then they disappear, and then it might show up somewhere else in another week. But they're these really kind of funky, almost like fuzzy little molds. And I really like them. And then the next one is something called three-leaved Solomon seal. You may have planted Solomon seal in your gardens at home. This is a relative of Solomon seal. It's kind of the native version. And this is a classic bog plant. It's one you might not see every day. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about. This one is an interesting plant, and it's an interesting story that I came across 2 days ago when I was getting ready for this talk. This plant is called coastal sweet pepperbush, and I don't know if anybody's into horticulture and gardening, but you may have planted this in your gardens at some point. It's a really nice kind of honey sweet aroma, and it's really beautiful, and it blooms late summer. Anyways, I came across this at my current job. We have a big database of all the plants of the Maritimes, and I was just kind of looking in it to see, I wonder if there's any rare plants from McNabs Island that I didn't know about that I could maybe talk about today. And I wasn't expecting much, and sure enough, there really wasn't anything, except for there was a record of coastal sweet pepperbush, which surprised me for a few reasons. One, because it is native to Nova Scotia, but it's only native to about 3 lakes in far southern Nova Scotia, and it's listed under the Canadian Species at Risk Act. And so I thought that it might have been an erroneous record, but I looked at the description and it said parent estate, which would mean that it was planted within the former Hugonon parent estate, which is the current house of the English Gardens. And so it was from arborist PM Taschereau. I didn't recognize the name. I don't know if Brian does either. Yeah. So he was doing surveys. He did a bunch of surveys across Nova Scotia, and one of the surveys was on McNabs. And like I said, it's native to Nova Scotia, and it's part of this disjunct group of plants called the Atlantic Coastal Plain Flora. They're mostly from the US coast, from Florida up to New Jersey, sometimes a little bit further, and then they got separated during the Ice Age. And so there's some very disjunct populations in Nova Scotia. And coastal sweet pepperbush was one of these plants. And so Perrin must have planted this back 1900 and 1880, 1890. And I would assume he didn't know at the time that it was a native plant, but he may have been the first one to bring it into Nova Scotia as this unknown native plant. And I don't think it would have been discovered back in these remote Nova Scotia lakes back in the 1880s. There wasn't a lot of botanical surveys that have been done. And so it's currently not listed on the management plan for list of garden plants, but I wonder if it survived up to 1970, if it's still around. So I hope Brian, and maybe the next time I'm on the island, we'll do a bit more searching to see if it's hidden away somewhere. So that's my hope, at least. So this would have been the old Perrin estate, and who knows if it was there. It may be hidden in one bush somewhere beside the house. That's my dream. So maybe I'll find a stump somewhere. And that'll be the end of my presentation, and it should lead into Brian's talk about the English Gardens.
So Iain, you don't know where it is at the parent state?
It's probably somewhere there, or it was there at some point, but it may have died out. But yeah, that's still quite a ways from when the last thing would have been planted. But
well, that was great, Iain. Mine's not going to be quite as colorful, but hopefully interesting. Good evening, folks here and folks at home, I guess, doing the Zoom thing. I'm going to talk about the Victorian English Gardens. Restoration, it's more of a revealing than restoration, but I'll get into that. Now, the up and down button. All right. It has been said that the Victorian gardens within the Hugonin Perrin estate once rivaled the Halifax Public Gardens, not in size, but in splendor and beauty. Now that's anecdotal. We really don't have a lot of factual information on that, but I think I'll maybe put a little bit of interesting context around this anyway. So this is a much younger me, and that's the Grand Allée, or the central walkway in the Halifax Public Gardens. As Kathy said, I was hired, and right after the onboarding process, my first work assignments were pruning the trees in the public garden. So the main allée is mostly white elm, American elm. That's me when I was the supervisor. And there's an area lift kind of up by the, that would be the YMCA gate. And of course, the YMCA isn't there anymore. And so we did use the area lift on where we could, and others you had to get the rope and saddle out and prune it the old-fashioned way. Just a little more information there. I'm now retired, surrounded by Kathy's at home and in my volunteer work, and it's great. So I can't say it's retired. We're just doing things that we like to do and not working for other people. We're pretty busy. All right, you really have to compare apples with apples when you talk about the public gardens and the Victorian gardens. The English gardens within the Hugonin Perrin estate have not been tended since about the 1930s, when Frederick Perrin passed away. And really, there's only a remnant of what was there lost in a regenerating forest until just fairly recently, and we'll get into that. The Halifax Public Gardens of today are professionally and lovingly tended year-round and have been recognized as a National Historic Site. Both were planted with a variety of exotic and introduced plants in the gardenesque tradition by avid horticulturalists. Both gardens have their origins from pre-existing landscapes and gardens, and I'll talk about that in a little minute. And there was no record of Frederick Perrin or Richard Power collaborating or working together. However, knowing how connected gardeners and gardening societies are, I bet you they knew of each other anyway. And this is just for fun. That's not the public gardens. That's actually the governor's summer garden. And that's it's not a picture. It's probably a sketch or a watercolor, circa 1759 from Citadel Hill. And if you look in the background, you're looking at McNabs Island. And here's one on McNabs Island from watercolor from Lilliton. And that's on top of Hugonin Hill and looking north into the city, and you're looking at George's Island and City of Halifax. So I just threw that in there just for fun. A little bit about Richard Power. He was the first superintendent of the Halifax Public Gardens. He's a horticulturist and a landscape gardener, born in Lismore, the Republic of Ireland. And there's a little map to orientate you where that was. He was the son of a gardener, and born 1841, passed away in 1934 at the ripe old age of 93. He apprenticed in the gardens at the Lismore Castle, working under the head gardener, Patrick Keane, and he arrived in Halifax in 1864 with a letter of reference from Keane. He married Anne Phelan, and the reason I brought that up is because Phelan is not a real common name. And when you do come across it, 99 times out of 100, it's spelled P-H-A-L-E-N. And this is the way my name is spelled. So maybe there's a connection there. I don't know. Anyway, they had 9 children. So obviously horticulturists are prolific propagators. My propagating days are over, dear. Don't worry. He was hired as the first garden superintendent in 1872 and was tasked with bringing the 2 adjoining gardens into one whole public gardens. He combined the 2 gardens by planting that Grand Allée, creating a central walkway. And the former gardens were the Nova Scotia Horticulture Society garden, and that was laid out in 1837. And there was an adjacent public park that was opened in 1867. So the public gardens really predate Canada. He provided the vision and spent the next 45 years creating a formal Victorian garden. There's over 126 different species surviving in the public gardens today. And the Halifax Public Gardens is considered one of the finest surviving examples of a Victorian garden in North America. And in 1984, the Public Gardens was recognized as a National Historic Site. Here's another little fun fact. This is a postcard depicting the gardens about 1909. So I'm thinking when they compare the public gardens and the gardens on McNabs Island, this is probably the era you were looking at. And of course, being an arborist, I'm drawn to the elm tree there that's been topped. And I think they were practicing pollarding, which was a very common European tree arboricultural practice. Usually it's not on elm and it's not that high up, but I wasn't around in 1909. Back to McNabs. This is Frederick Perrin. He was born in Temple Cloud, Somersetshire. Have to be careful with that one. Again, a little map to orientate you. He was an avid horticulturalist and a world traveler. He emigrated to McNabs Island about 1885 with many family members. Again, horticulturalists seem to be prolific propagators. He introduced many exotic trees and shrubs and other plants as he developed the beautiful English gardens on the former Hugonon estate. He passed away in 1930 at the ripe old age of 94. So Power 93, Perrin 94. So there's hope. The English gardens, as I said, have not been regularly tended since his passing in the 1930s. So what this is as I said, both gardens have their history in two landscapes. So Roderick Hugonon married into the McNabb family, and he actually built the Georgian house mansion that's on the estate. And he lived there with his wife for about 10 years. And then he and his wife sailed for England around 1865, and the property sat fallow for about 20 years. And along came Frederick Perrin and bought it right around 1885. So what we're looking at again is another Lilliton watercolor, circa 1860. So this is before Perrin bought the property and introduced the Victorian gardens. So this would have been the work that Roderick Hugonon had done. You can see the estate, the mansion, and off to the right would have been gardens he would have planted. This would have been a horticulture garden, mostly vegetables. He would have planted some orchards, and of course the drumlin was cleared, and that was probably pasture land. So that's the garden that Frederick Perrin would have inherited. This is just a little sketch of the gardens around 1880s. That's probably when Frederick Perrin was on scene. And you can see that many of the roadways, pathways have hedgerows of trees planted around them. Probably wych elm and Scotch elm, that's another name for it, and European linden. And many of those trees are still there today. Some of them not in very good shape, but many of those trees still survive. So here's Frederick Perrin on the front step of the house right around 1890s with the family pet. And we saw this a little bit earlier tonight. This is a side view looking north. And even though the house burnt down in the late 1940s, the front step is still there. And you can actually go in the gardens, stand on the step, and look over the terraced lawn. And with some of the restoration work we've done, or revealing work, you can get a little bit of an idea of maybe what it looked like. And that small plant there on the top of the terrace lawn is Japanese red maple. That's about 1890. And this is the maple probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I would say, because the work at the tea house I don't think has been started yet. Also in the picture, there's Japanese barberry kind of underneath the maple, and back by the tea house, there's a hedge of common barberry. And being a formal English garden, there is another Japanese maple planted mirror image on the other side of the house, and they kind of frame the view and they frame the house. And you can also see the top of the terrace lawn. One of the most well-known trees in the gardens is the European copper beech. This is when it still had some semblance of a crown. So probably, I'm going to say 25 years ago. And oh, is that right? Right.
She's about 8, 10, 8, 10. He's 32.
Pretty good guess then, yeah. Yeah. So some of the other introduced trees and shrubs that are remaining, there's a lot that have disappeared and we just can't find anymore. But some of the introduced trees and shrubs would be mock orange, hydrangea species, English hawthorn, horse chestnuts, the Scotch elm or the wych elm, black locust, European ash, and European linden. There's also many native species which were inventoried, but and they would have been part of the English gardens as well, because you could see by the picture of the house there were some spruce trees in the background. As Kathy mentioned, the park was dedicated, or the islands were dedicated as a provincial park in 2002, and a management plan was approved in 2005, and it's a 25-year plan. It's about in its 18th year now. And the plan was to steer resource conservation and to guide park development and protection. There's always that catchphrase, as budgets permit. And the plan does recognize the need for partnerships, the need for additional inventories and studies. And the Friends of McNabs Island Society certainly was a key stakeholder in that whole process. I wasn't involved, I wasn't around on that time, but I know Kathy and Royce and Denise, were you? Yes, you were. Just, yeah. I'm a newbie. So this is from the plan. It just talks a little bit about the zoning, and I don't have the whole island there. Basically, Majors Light north. What I'm showing here is most of the island is considered an environmental protection zone. Basically, let nature take its course. But there is a resource conservation zone, recreation development zones, national historic sites, of course, and a very, very small portion of the island still is in private hands. So this is an example of some of the resource conservation zones. There's more than that, but areas around areas of the park containing significant natural, cultural, and recreational features and landscapes that require a high standard of conservation. Places like the Tea House, the former Finley property, the site of the former detention barracks, and of course the former Hugoton Perrin estate with its wealth of introduced flora. So speaking specifically about the Hugoton Perrin estate, the management plan speaks to the remnants of the English garden, and it speaks to a site management plan to be prepared to determine location and the extent of the plants, both native and introduced. So there was a vegetation inventory conducted in 2011. Is that the one you referred to, Ian, or was that another one? Okay. So the plan will consider limited restoration and stabilization of the Victorian gardens and other historic elements of the Hugoton Perrin estate. And the plan may include limited replacement planting, clearing the terraces, and exposing the foundation of the Hugoton Perrin home. And a lot of work we've done over several volunteer work days. So this is just the plant inventory that DNR did in 2011. What they did is they geolocated the different plants. They were numbered. There was a stake put in the ground with a number, and the ledger on the side corresponded with the plants. And what Ian did when he was a summer staff, he went around and what I call proofed, because there were some mistakes in this inventory. So he went around with his skills. He was able to proof the identification. He replaced missing stakes. He marked on the stakes whether they were native or introduced. As I said, there's quite a few native plants still within the English Gardens. And then we went on from there. 130 cultivars of introduced species. I'm not 100% sure where that came from, but as I said, there's many, many, many plants that probably have disappeared and we may never find, may never know. So Kathy talked about an Arborist Day. This is the first one in 2012, and it was championed by Stan Kochenoff, who's a landscape planner, landscape architect, and also a certified arborist. And he coordinated with the Friends, and they did have 22 arborist workers on the island that day. Many Friends of McNabs workers providing the ground support. And really, they got a lot more done than they thought they would. We had so many arborists that we were actually able to break into two groups. And I was with the group that started up in the north end, the hedgerow of linden trees up around the houses. And then we finished that work and joined the crew working in the Victorian Gardens just after lunch. And they were actually able to help do some trail work and do some other cutting up around the pop factory as well. And here's Arborist Day 2.0. That was in 2016. Just a little bit smaller group, but there was still about 16 people on the island. Some people are here that day. And Kathy, you made it to that one. Again, that's in front of the Copper Beach. And you can see it's not quite the same tree that it was when your daughters were climbing in it. Lack of maintenance, hurricanes, ice damage, that'll do it. Here's where we're clearing some of the trees in around the foundation. So people will know what was there. If we didn't, it would grow up and it would just look like part of the regenerating forest. So now you can stand on the front step and look out over the terrace lawns, or you can turn around and look and see the foundation, which is exposed. Again, the tea house is in the background, and with the old cladding on it, it was before Royce started the restoration of the outdoor educational center. And we're employing another European arboriculture technique called propping, and it actually is a recognized technique. That's to help stabilize that poor Copper Beach. It's a very, very popular spot for people to sit underneath, just relax, have their lunch. We've had some of the Dalhousie classes have some of their lectures underneath there. So that just supports it and helps keep it safe. The wood we're using is from some of the false acacia or the black locust that were removed to reveal some of the other plants. It's one of the hardest woods that you would find on the island, and it tends to petrify more than decay. So we're propping that up. And we packaged up both work days, presented it, and McNabs, the Friends at McNabs won the Arbor Day Award, the Gold Leaf Award for 2016. So that's quite an achievement, really. There's the president of the society. I represented the Friends, and then Kathy, where's that plaque now? And here's some of Iain's work. If you take your cell phone out and scan that QR code, this is what it's going to bring up. And as I said, there's the Copper Beach with a class of people underneath. So that's why we propped it up. And it also helps to document and promote and interpret the different trees and shrubs within the English Gardens. It's an ongoing project. Iain started it off. Jonah, are you here tonight, Jonah? Jonah picked it up again last year, and hopefully you're going to continue on when you get a chance. He was going to try and incorporate some of the Mi'kmaq culture and maybe even the Mi'kmaq plant names onto the information. I think that would be very, very relevant if we are able to do that. So some of the introduced species weren't always welcome. I'm talking about the knotweed, not the deer. It really became a problem after Hurricane Juan, which basically probably, I would say, took out 40–50% of the trees, wind throw, and that opened up the opportunity for the Japanese knotweed. At one time, the deer actually early on kept it under reasonable control because they do eat it, and you can actually eat it. You can make it, cook it up like spinach. And you can actually make wine out of it. Kathy and I have had a glass of Japanese knotweed wine, and it's not too bad. So if you're into making wine, we know where there's a good supply of knotweed. And it's not just a McNabs Island problem. This just shows the distribution of Japanese knotweed in North America. And very, very invasive. Now, in its native habitat, which is volcanic soil, the rhizomes really can't spread the way they can here because of the type of soil. And there's also fungal diseases that help keep it in check. But here in North America, it's just very, very, very invasive. A little bit of information on it. It's a member of the buckwheat family. It was originally brought in from Asia as a specimen plant, as something unique. And sometimes it works out and sometimes comes back to bite you. Where you can't do the herbicide control, you can achieve a reasonable control by mechanically cutting, mowing, pulling. And we've done that with the city of Halifax, and we've certainly been doing that, certainly not all over the island, but on the up around the English Gardens. And our 2 summer students, or we actually have 3 summer students from last year. 2 are coming back, Davlin and Brianna. And last year we bought a battery-powered grass whip, that's compatible with the solar system in the tea house, which means that the batteries can be recharged by the inverter. And they both have been trained. Well, all 3 have been trained, but with Davlin and Brianna coming back, you know what's waiting for you. Their main job, of course, was to lead the tours, but all 3, well, we had 4 students last year. In their downtime when they were on the island, they were pretty quick to grab the grass whip and help keep the knotweed under control. Not only invasives, but we call them escapees. There's the Japanese barberry. You can now find that all over the island. The black locust, which I talked about, can be found throughout Nova Scotia, as well as all over the island. Virginia creeper, now that actually is native, but it certainly has spread throughout many of the trees, especially up on the north end of the island. And Iain, you talked about edibles. They used to make a glaze for Thanksgiving out of the berries from the Japanese barberry. I don't know what that would taste like. Pretty bitter, I think. But anyway, yeah, they used to, for their Thanksgiving turkeys, they used to make a glaze out of the barberry. Brianna, you're not allowed to say anything. So for all the gardeners out there, what are we looking at? Japanese beetle. Yeah. Gardener's nightmare, horticulturist nightmare. We got permission from DN because we had found a few Japanese beetles on the island. Actually, one day we were up working on the tea house and a Japanese beetle landed on my jacket, and I knew what it was. But and then one of the other volunteers going back on the boat had one. They found one on their backpack. So we approached DNRR and asked if we could put up a pheromone trap just to see if the pest was established on the island. Was it first introduced to North America in Nova Scotia in Yarmouth in the 1930s. And the problem with this is both the larval and adult stage are very, very heavy feeders. Their host species list is over 200 species of plants. Many of their favorites are plants in the Victorian English Gardens on McNabs, so we're concerned. So what we did is the trapping program last year, and also our summer staff, they did kind of a search and destroy by actually picking them off plants in English Gardens. We did determine that the population was established on the island. This year we proposed a trapping program where we would put 3 traps in the gardens and monitor it and trying to do a trap out. Normally you wouldn't do that because you run the risk of attracting other beetles into the area, but where it's an island and we're hoping just a fairly new population that might, we might have some success with that. We haven't heard back yet, but there's been some significant staff shuffling around at DNRR, so hopefully we'll hear back before the end of the year. This is Brianna's bug board, and it's actually out in the room next door. She was one of our summer staff from last year, entomology student, and she collected and mounted, I think, well, it was over 50. And correct me if I'm wrong, Brianna, but I think you indicated that 50% of the insects collected were not native to the region. Yeah, so not saying that they're invasive other than ones like the knotweed, Japanese beetle, but she also did a write-up on each one of the insects, and that in the summertime, that is over in the tea house to become part of the outdoor education materials. There's Brianna presenting her bug board. We were indoors during COVID, so we had the masks on, so to stay safe. We already heard a little bit about the park management agreement. I think that's a real game changer for us, because instead of having to do apply for a letter of authority every time we wanted to do a project, we now have a 5-year management agreement, and it can be renewed for another 5 years, and both parties agree to it. It's been vetted by the province's legal and management, risk management folks. It's a non-financial partnership agreement. The Friends of McNabs can operate and maintain the former tea house, so it gives us a little bit of exclusivity in managing that after spending all that energy and resources restoring it. We can also provide visitor services, outdoor education experiences, enhanced maintenance activities, and special projects within the park. The key word there is enhanced. DNRR, as part of the agreement, will continue to provide current levels of maintenance and services to the park, again, as resources permit. Part of the agreement contains a map, basically, of the roles and responsibilities of each. So DNRR are going to continue to mow up around the Davis Conrad houses, Matthew Lynch House, the Jack Lynch House, Fort Ives, and the Tea House lawn and the lower field. And mow some of the trails, the Old Military Road, the Lynch Road, Carriage Lane, and Garrison Road. The trails we've agreed to take on are a solid black line. We try to keep them within 1 kilometer of the tea house and the work shed there, because that's probably where we'll keep the equipment. And we wanted to take on something that we thought we could manage and be successful at. And if the agreement has an annual review, if we want to increase that, we can. But where it's just renewed or just a new agreement, we're going to see how it works out. And here's another picture taken last year after our summer staff had the grass whip out. And you can see the Japanese maple and some of the barberry. You can see the terrace lawn, and it actually looks a little bit like a terrace garden again. Not quite the public gardens, but low steps. And of course, I want to acknowledge the reference materials and sources for the talk. Anyway, that's my presentation. Thank you. Yes, Denise.
You mentioned in the public gardens that the elm trees had been cut back, and you gave it a special name. What was that supposed to do for those elm trees?
Okay, the question was, for the people at home, if you didn't hear it, the technique on the elm trees in the public gardens was pollarding. And it's been around for centuries. The idea, my understanding, is you can plant large trees, and pollarding keeps a smaller canopy. So because space is a premium in Europe, but also they use the wood, the new sprouts for propagation, and also for fuel wood. So that's my understanding of it.
They didn't look very healthy to me. I didn't think there'd be much canopy coming out of those ones.
Yeah, it doesn't promote the canopy and the benefits that we appreciate tree canopies of today, but
It's super popular in France,
Yes,
and
Yeah.
they do, surprisingly, they do sprout. And they make kind of like a
a
head
ball,
like that
yeah,
ball.
yeah. It doesn't seem to, if done properly, I mean, there is a proper technique. It's not just a matter of topping them off. The trees can live, their normal genetic life. Oh, good question though, Denise. Thank you. We got to go to another, and then we'll get back to you. Yes.
Question about the Japanese barberry. It's supposed to be a noxious weed in many jurisdictions because it's a host for wheat smut. Is it legal to grow it and sell it in the Nova Scotia, Canada?
Okay. It was a co-host for that, and my understanding is the newer varieties of wheat aren't as susceptible to it, and the newer varieties of the barberry are more resistant. So they kind of broke the cycle of that. Kathy, I know you're a little bit familiar with that.
Well, I think the selling of it is very limited to those specific varieties. I think.
Yes, yeah, the varieties. Yeah, yeah.
But in existing places where it is, it wasn't required to be removed. Yeah.
So you want to look at GME?
No, you can still buy the newer varieties, the resistant varieties at the garden centers. In fact, it's one of the more popular selling plants. They've got new color varieties of it too, and compact varieties of it. Great question. Denise, oh, sorry, Royce, I'll get to you. Royce.
Cropping out the Japanese beetle, like eradicate it from the island, is that a reasonable expectation?
The theory behind that is you use a pheromone trap, a dual lure. The pheromone trap attracts the beetles, and the floral lure attracts, the dual lure attracts the males, the floral lure attracts the females. I might have it mixed up. To the trap, they get down in there and they can't get out. And so what you're doing is you're reducing the adult stage, and fewer adults means fewer, insects. You're never going to eradicate an insect population. The idea is to break the life cycle, get it down to low enough numbers, and it will be ongoing so that the damage they cause is minimal. Yeah. Denise?
You spoke of genetic life of plants.
Yes.
We know that Aaron started planting around 1880s till he died in 1930s.
Yes.
So what do you think? How long will these plants go on? Because they've really been hammered by storms and blackpit.
Their natural life could be centuries for a lot of those trees, the European ash, the lindens, the wych elms, but the fact that they haven't been maintained, a lot of them have been taken over by the regenerating forest. You can tell by the state of the trees on the island now, the introduced trees, that they're not going to live, what would normally be their expected lifespan. Kathy.
Brian, you didn't mention the other dreaded pest that has decided its favorite food is the introduced species.
The porcupine?
Yeah.
I tried to skirt around that one. I didn't have any pictures. Yeah, I mean, porcupine is part of the fauna of the region. And although until we found the first one there, about 5 years ago, they haven't been a problem on the island. But as Kathy said, they seem to have developed a taste for the introduced species. So they went after the willows, the Scotch elms. They were on some of the lindens, and what they do is they girdle them, and the Camperdown elm up in the houses, they totally girdle that and kill that tree. So, I mean, they do what animals do, they eat. But the fact that they went after these introduced species as a preference rather than the native species, DNR, we reported it to DNR in hopes that it would do something. But, you know, being a native animal to this part of the region, you know, they're reluctant to take anything too drastic. But for some reason, the porcupine disappeared from the island. And then what reappeared this last year. Yeah, I think you found it in behind. Yeah. Yeah, I had nothing to do with that. Yeah, yeah, you know, those are some of the challenges, you know. It is a provincial park. It comes under the provincial park regulations. We can't use herbicides on the Japanese knotweed. There's all kinds of things we can't do because it's a provincial park that you probably would do, you know, on private lands. So we try and come up with creative solutions. Like the trap out program for the Japanese beetle. I do a lot of work for Mount St. Vincent, and we've been doing, we also use the beneficial nematodes, which goes after the larval stage, and then we use the traps for the adult stage. And we're not eradicating it, but every year when we monitor, the population is going down. So, you know, the idea is to, you know, to try and minimize the damage.
And that is your role this hour.
Yes. It was introduced right around the same time, and there's all kinds of seedlings. So we've asked if we could go dig up one of these seedlings and plant that as a replacement tree, because the copper beech is not going to be around a whole lot longer. We haven't been given permission to do that because another part of the park regulations is they don't want to introduce new plants, you know, because it's a environmental conservation zone. So we're kind of struggling, you know, in the plan says in some cases, the conservation will supersede. In other cases, the, you know, the natural processes will supersede. So yes, we would love to do some planting, especially that copper beech, but we'll keep asking. Yes.
Shoreline reclamation, what are some plant examples that could be used in order to help maintain any shorelines to help prevent further erosion?
Wow, maybe Iain could help out with some of that. With climate change, we know that, you know, it's going to be an issue.
Yeah, well, it's a tricky one. There's a variety of native plants or trees you can use. Red oak is always a good one to plant along coastal areas because it can take the salt spray. Aronia shrub, chokeberry is another good one. And then if you're looking to do actual kind of right along the shoreline that's getting all the water, you could do natural shoreline armoring, which is kind of a new technique that has kind of been exploding the past 10 years-ish. Involves nating different or planting different grasses and using more natural barriers than rather than having a big concrete slab. And then the other thing that's it's really good is to have eelgrass, especially on McNabs, where you have these kind of long coastal, quite shallow sandy areas. Is either planting eelgrass or maintaining eelgrass to kind of limit the wave action, the energy from the water that coming towards the shore. And so there's a few different groups that are working on eelgrass. Like the Ecology Action Center is doing a lot of good work on it. And so there is eelgrass around McNabs Island. So we're hoping that'll help limit it. With the yellow birch? Yeah, there's just some, I mean, so the Acadian forest is the natural forest ecosystem for the Maritimes. And so McNabs used to be all Acadian forest, and now there's just a few little pockets left that didn't get cut over. And some of the typical tree species would be yellow birch, eastern hemlock, red maple, sugar maple, American elm. And so there actually are some really, really large eastern hemlocks in the Victorian gardens, which I guess you did mention, but they're not in great shape. And I've always thought of them as being planted, but I wonder if they were there originally and they just decided not to cut them down. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that we're not sure yet.
Yeah.
We don't have any data information to support one way or the other. They are native.
Yeah, they are native and they're nice remnants, but they're just so big that they're at least a couple hundred years old. So it seems like it creates gardens. But
All excellent questions. Thank you. Oh, we got one more.
I don't know a lot about it. I'm not too familiar with my seaweeds, but I was looking on iNaturalist just to see if it was around, and there was several. It seems like it's just along the beach if you're in the right spot.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think you could find it anywhere on the side. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I do want to thank Brianna for saving the night, for lending us her laptop so we could do our presentations.
Okay, either one of you. We have little gifts. Well, thanks so much to Iain and Brian for the talk about the plants on the island and the hope for the gardens with the beetle trapping program, and also for all the information about the habitats of the island and the biodiversity. It's a pretty rich place, and it's kind of a little microcosm of other places in Atlantic Canada. We have a little gift for each of you, and we have to tell you that, well, it's giving away what the gift is, but it's a little bit of McNabs Island, okay?
Park management plan.